Lagarde's predecessor, Mario Draghi, famously tried repeatedly to persuade EU leaders to loosen the budget purse strings with not much success, arguably. Will the virus finally force them to act?
Well, that is the question. And, you know, Tom, it's hard to believe that it won't force them finally to act, because anything that the European Union, the euro area faced before does seem not to compare to what it is being faced now. And yes, Christine Lagarde, relatively new head of the European Central Bank, recently the head of the International Monetary Fund. So she's used to dealing with this question. How can you get governments to step up and spend some money instead of depending on central banks to solve all the problems? She said, importantly, governments must support each other. She said that economic and financial linkages mean that no country can avoid damage just because it happens somewhere else in the bloc. If not all countries are cured, she wrote, the others will suffer. Solidarity is, in fact, self-interest. So all these points very well taken. Some great reporting from our Bloomberg News team pointing out that basically when you step back, what you have is, you know, a lot of hard-hit nations like Italy in the south. Italy, which also has the second biggest government debt after Greece. So they are in a very tough spot. Southern nations like Italy pitted against the hawkish northern states on how do you pay for this. Our Bloomberg News reporting also shows that it was a dispute between the Netherlands and Italy over how to use the credit lines in the EU's bailout fund to deal with the pandemic. So now there's many programs floating around. There's going to be a call that starts on Thursday. They failed the EU leaders on Wednesday. Will they be able to come to some kind of agreement about how to move forward? This is so important because this is the kind of question that has bedeviled the EU for so long. You know, you're all member states of one sort of country now, right? The EU, the European Union. But the individual interests are still so strong, and that's what makes this so difficult. And that's why Christine Lagarde, I guess, took her frustration out. We'll see if it makes a difference.
Kathleen, minutes out of the Fed's emergency meeting back on the 15th last month, put stuff into context for us based on what they've done. Top two things you think we should know.
Well, I think what's so important is that you can see from the minutes. So they had the March 2nd, David, they had the emergency rate cut. Then on March 15th, another emergency meeting, another rate cut. The rate is nearly to zero. We were told, of course, that there'd be no limits to quantitative easing. A terrific story I recommend to everybody on Bloomberg by Craig Torres, who's been covering the Federal Reserve for years, and Liz Koppel-McCormick, who was one of our top bond market reporters, pointing out that what the minutes reinforce is reporting they've done, suggesting that as early as mid-February, when the Treasury market started selling off so badly, the Fed was getting very concerned, from Jay Powell at the Board of Governors, the chair, to Lori Logan, who is at the New York Fed. What are we going to do? And so they were definitely realizing that they would have to do something about the Treasury market, have to do something about liquidity. In fact, the minutes mentioned this acute lack of liquidity in the Treasury market. And, of course, subsequently know that Treasury bond purchases through April 1st dwarf anything that we saw in the financial crisis. I also would like to remind people all the time that Jay Powell, besides being an investment banker, he was the head of the domestic finance oversight regulatory group in Washington at the Treasury Department. This is one of his areas of expertise, and I think it's another area where we see that expertise coming through as he leads the Fed in dealing with what's going on, not just with interest rates in the economy, but what's been going on with financial markets, particularly credit markets and bond markets.